So that while we had a period of great crustal unrest out here in which these older Paleozoic rocks were thrown into folds, and the still older basement complex rocks beneath them, here there was little crustal disturbance, so far at least as the compressional, and so we pass, you might say, from Act 2 to Act 3 in this region without any marked break in the continuity. In Act 3, Scene 1, there was deposited over this region a succession of sands and silts, which are conspicuous because of their uniform red color, and it happens the campus is built on this succession. Every time we dig a hole a few feet deep through the alluvial cover, we come into red siltstones or shales, and these are conspicuous rocks wherever they occur because of their color. There have been debate for many years as to their origin, their high oxidation. The iron is in ferric form, suggested there was aridity. The absence of fossils, it's one of the most, you might say, impoverished of all the succession of rocks, in the fact it is devoid of evidences of past life, and led to believe that it was deposited as an arid condition. Real recent studies, however, suggest that it probably was deposited, some believe, is beneath the sea because of its uniformity over long distances. But we have a red bed, and this becomes one of our most noted formations, and we call it throughout this region the Chugwater Formation. It takes its name from Chugwater, which is a stream, and the station on the Sinest, some 70 miles to the west-east of us, and a rather unusual name. You don't see it very often. And it's a formation which was laid down and they get several hundred feet thick. Under the campus, it's about 700 feet thick. Now, and that is spread over to the west, all of the thickening as we go again toward the source supply. Now we have, coming into the picture, one of the most interesting chapters in the past history of this region. You have here our surface would be here, we'll see. These are a vast floodplain. Well, first the sea comes in from the north. I have to keep my seas, which is filled with marine fossils, and its shoreline, it passes right through Laramie and comes out to the south and goes out to the west. And so we have now a shallow sea invades this region and thins out, and in it, derived from the adjacent region, are laid down a succession of shales and sandstones which carry marine organisms, both invertebrate and vertebrate. We find here that oyster beds, squids, big fish, and rarely but find some of the great marine swimmers that evolved early in Mesozoic time. So we have a series of sands and silts then being laid down, mostly beneath the sea, and we go beyond the sea, we'll have the shoreline sands, we say, marginal to the sea, and it happens that the shoreline falls somewhere between Laramie and Centennial to the west of us. Because at Centennial we can find the marine fossils, but here we don't. This is called the Sundance Sea. Jurassic and mid-Jurassic age, which came from the north, spread out, and then after laying down the thin veneer, which thickens as we go toward the big trough, seaway, and it withdraws, goes back the way it came, apparently, and left now a monotonous, flat floodplain. Hard to conceive, there's hardly any surface. Rivers draining chiefly probably from the west and from the south, coming out of the highlands, drained across the Rocky Mountain region as slow, sluggish streams, meandering, bayous, and so on. And there was an abundance of semi-tropical vegetation. It's a little hard to visualize palm trees growing in Wyoming, but we had palms, we had cycad palms, we had rushes, vast semi-tropical world over this vast floodplain covering hundreds of 100,000 or more square miles, devoid of any marked relief. And the silts and the sands which were laid down, coming now from the... And this is one of the most spectacular chapters in our story. As this floodplain evolved, and muds were being deposited on the area of silts and there arrived, beginning of this region, this vast host of giant reptiles known to you all as the dinosaurs. They marched in here as an invading host, found the climate, condition congenial for their survival, and they apparently continued to survive without interruption and going through a vast evolution for something in the order of magnitude of 70 million years. These, you remember, are reptiles, cold-blooded, smoother, scaly-skinned, egg-laying, and are the dominant and largest forms of land life ever to evolve. I can't take time to dwell upon them, except I might mention one who was noted, a rather modest chap. You could just about park him in this room, but he, indicated here, he is noted for he was one of the sports. And I use the word sport now as he covered with excrescences. In other words, he's dolled up. He had a double row of massive plates along his back, which probably had some protective significance. And they were probably covered with horn sheaths. He must have been rather costly to develop and maintain, and then he had some two pairs of 3-foot spikes on the end of his tail. We're not so concerned with his ornamentation as we are with the fact that he was one of the enigmas of all time. If we study him, we find that he had a brain in the usual place, about as big as a golf ball. But if we try to run back as he passes through the pelvic girdle, he had an emergence in a large nerve ganglion and a secondary brain which is 20 times as large. And this raises the question of how it was nature experimenting with how could an animal function with two nerve centers, or two brains. Let one wit to commemorate this situation with this jingle that you might enjoy. Behold the mighty dinosaur, famous in prehistoric lore, for you, not only for his weight and strength, but for his intellectual length. For you'll observe by these remains the creature had two sets of brains, one in his head, the usual place, the other in his spinal base. Thus he could reason a priori as well as a posteriori. And no problem bothered him a bit. He made both head and tail of it. So wise was he, so wise and solemn, each thought filled just the spinal column. And if one brain found the pressure strong, it passed a few ideas along. And something slipped his forward mind and was rescued by the one behind. And if in error he was caught, he had a saving afterthought. And as he thought twice before he spoke, he had no judgment to revoke. So that, and he could think without congestion upon both sides of every question. Really, the dinosaurs, they culminated in the giants that we have. A big one, he came in during this time. It's mounted in the museum, 75 feet long and 15 feet high, probably weighed 40 tons. We don't know exactly, but somewhere in that neighborhood, 10 times as big as an elephant as far as the weight is concerned. All right, so much then for Act 2, the Jurassic period. First, a marine succession with Sundance. Later, and this takes its name from its original locality, and the Morrison Formation from Morrison, Colorado. And it had been called the Como Formation from Como Bluff, where these dinosaurs, most famous quarries, were excavated back in the 70s and 80s of the last century. Now we're ready for the Cretaceous. And here we have the continuation of the general United States state setting, highlands to the east, to the west, to the south, with the rivers coming down. And we had a sea come in now from covering this region, a great seaway which swept in and probably joined the Gulf of Mexico with the Arctic. A little difficult to conceive of a sea 1,000 miles wide, maybe, joining. And this sea advanced and retreated. And there was a vast succession of sediments laid down, in part beneath the sea, and in part up on the land. And this was one of the interesting periods, in that the succession upon the land carries the coal, which we have such abundance. In other words, we had sands and silts laid down through thousands of feet of thickness at the expense of the highlands, Asian highlands. And you have to have more highlands. These highlands probably went through more than one impulse of uplift and supply. And then as we come to the shoreline, we find that we have laid down rocks, silts and sands, as we